Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. First, let me say how very grateful I am to be present here in the Gambia. The younger generation may not know how the name the Gambia came about. We were discussing with him as we drove yesterday from Dakar in Senegal. But you will know that there was a debate in those very early years that there was the possibility of confusing Gambia with Zambia, and that the effort to ensure that such confusion did not arise, your country was christened the Gambia. And that is unique in the sense that you are the only country in the world that has the definite article "the" as part of our name. And I remember as a very young man that your first president was one of the leading figures in Africa, Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara. And you may take it for granted, but part of the reason why a country such as yours, whose population is not very big, hosts a number of continental organizations, are to be attributed to the first generation leaders of the Gambia. I also, at the very outset, wish to express my profound and heartfelt gratitude to the Gambians in the diaspora, Musa and Abu Bakr, who are resident in the United States of America, who have been in touch with me since the month of December. Indeed, I was supposed to be present here in the month of December, but owing to other engagements, we said that we would be present in the month of February. And I'm very glad because I'm in touch with quite a number of young Gambians who are very keen on the continent of Africa and her success. And I'm glad that my presentation has been preceded by that of Madam Adelaide, in the sense that some of the words she has deliberately and appropriately utilized can be utilized in the context of Africa. It is true that indeed women in Africa have not been allowed to play their rightful role, so that it's legitimate to say that they ought to break the glass ceiling. It is equally legitimate to say that they are facing a brick wall in very many areas of their endeavor. It is equally true that they have to navigate their way in the labyrinth of cultural practices and legal hurdles that stand in their way. But it is also true that those words can be used in respect of the continent of Africa and the African peoples. Africa continues to punch below her weight in the economic arena, in the political arena, in the social arena. There are many Afro-pessimists who hold the view that Africa will never stand alongside other civilizations as a prosperous continent. There are those who look at Africa and only see the negatives, but yet Africa is great in prospect. Today, we are the youngest continent in the world in terms of the complexion of our demography. As we drove yesterday from Dakar in Senegal on our way to Banjul, the Gambia, I saw young men and women, playing on the road, some riding horses, some tending the animals, some working in the salt pans. And I posed the rhetorical question to my brother Adam. What is the future of these young men 20 years from today? When the statistics were given to you this afternoon about maternal mortality, about infant mortality, about the crude death rates, about the per capita income of Gambia, which could be said of very many African countries, what ran through my mind is how can we reverse this trend? The issues that people debate at different forums are such that sometimes we look at them as if they were merely academic. When we talk about the GDP of Africa, the 55 African countries combined, I say 55 because I know Morocco will want us to say 54, because in their mind the Sahrawi ought not to be recognized. When we talk about the GDP of Africa at about 2 trillion United States dollars, when we talk about the per capita income of various African countries, the question that we must ask, why is it that the continent has failed to realize better development? The combined GDP of the continent of Africa is smaller than the GDP of the Federal Republic of Germany. Remember that we are nearly 1.7 billion of us in the 55 odd countries. Germany, with a population of slightly above 80 million, has a GDP of nearly 4 trillion. Norway, with a population of no more than 6 million, has a sovereign fund, money that is just kept away for future generations of $1 trillion, so that notionally Norwegians yet to be born already have money to their credit. Not even born, not even conceived. In fact, Norwegians whose parents have not yet been born, notionally have an allocation. But for the African continent, even little children whose parents have not been born have a debt on their head. The question is, how has this come about? And it's important to say at the very outset that perhaps we have analyzed the African problem for too long, and that perhaps we ought not to continue to engage in analysis. But yet there is wisdom in reminding ourselves that when our founding fathers were in the forefront of the struggle for independence, the clarity in their mind was that independence did not simply mean the acquisition of new names in respect of certain countries, or the raising of flags, or the composition of national anthems. No, it did not mean that. It meant that we were releasing ourselves from the chains of slavery and the chains of colonization, so that we could utilize our resources to benefit our people and to improve the quality of the lives of the people. If you look at the early leaders in the independent days, and I many times go back to the 32 speeches delivered in 1963 by the 32 heads of states and government who assembled in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, you listen to each one of them. It was amazing, even the ones that did not govern very well, the clarity with which they thought. If you listen, and I was just reading some of the speeches that were given by some of the leaders who were removed very quickly, such as Amadou Ahidjo of the Cameroons, the clarity with which he thought and articulated the vision that although we of the Cameroons were colonized by the French partly and by the British partly, we are combining our efforts so that we can improve the quality of our education, so that we can improve the quality of our health services, so that we can improve infrastructure. I'm picking Ahidjo essentially because the Cameroons now is in the midst of problems. We know, for example, that the Cameroons are now divided paradoxically and ironically between the English-speaking and the French-speaking. Africa remains the only continent in the world which still refers to ourselves as Francophone and Anglophone. No other continent does that. If you ask the Cameroons now, have we realized the promises that we gave ourselves at the time of independence? The answer is no. If you went to yet another country that is in the throes of problems, Guinea-Bissau, those of you who are a little older, or those of you who are keen historians, will remember an African nationalist who is not remembered as he should be, Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral was one of the greatest freedom fighters in the continent of Africa. And when you read some of the things that he said in those early days, you'll be amazed at the clarity with which he thought. Yet today we know that Guinea-Bissau is not moving in the direction that it ought to. Another country that one can pick in order to demonstrate how we have failed to realize our potential is Mali. You'll remember at that time it was called the Sudan. And one of the greatest leaders to come out of that part of the world was Modibo Keïta. Modibo Keïta was one of the few individuals from the former French colonies, together with Ahmed Sékou Touré, who in those very early days stood against the French and said, we do not want some French, we want freedom. And one can go on in identifying the countries, and one can see that in quite a number of countries things have not gone in the right direction. But there are countries which, since the attainment of political independence, have also made useful strides, and there are changes that have happened visibly and things that ought to be celebrated. But the truth be told, Africa has things that ought to be celebrated. When we drove from Dakar, Senegal to Banjul, the Gambia, the road was motored. That is a good thing. When we took the ferry, I saw the new ferry, the Kunta Kinte. I didn't take it. Perhaps next time I will. But there is a sense in which one can see that certain things are happening. I stayed in a hotel where there was electricity throughout the night, and that is a good thing. Today you can take it for granted that there is electricity. A few years there was no electricity. So that there are good things to be celebrated, but yet there is a sense in which we must ask ourselves, could we have done better? And the answer is, we could have done much better. And the question is, why have we not done as we should have? And the answer is one that we are familiar with. Madam Adelaide has in some ways demonstrated why. We have for too long ignored a very important segment in our society, the female of the species. And I remember it is the American Abraham Lincoln who said that you cannot have a society that grows half slave and half free. He said it in respect of the slaves and the free, but we can say it in respect of men and women. You cannot have 50% of your population excluded from politics, excluded from economics, excluded from societal activities, and only recognized for purposes of tokenism, and you expect to succeed. You cannot. The other unfortunate thing is that we, even those in leadership, say the same thing that I do forcefully at conferences. In other words, we have perfected the art of making platform statements which we do not believe in. And we are saying that we must move away from intellectualizing these debates, from moralizing these debates, from philosophizing about these debates, and going back to the basics. And what are the basics? The basics are that having recognized that part of the reason why we have not realized our potential is because we have excluded women, we must ask what is the other reason, and the other reason is corruption. You know, several years ago, I was in Uganda, and I made a presentation about the subject of corruption. And during the question time, a Ugandan rose from the audience and said that he had listened to me very carefully. And after listening to me very carefully, he agreed with 99% of what I've said about and against corruption. But he disagreed with me on one thing. He said there is no corruption in Africa, contrary to what I've said. And I was stunned and taken aback. He said in Africa there is looting, not corruption. And he proceeded to make a distinction between looting and corruption. And he said that corruption presupposes that there is some modicum of intelligence in the manner in which you steal. But looting is the most blatant form of theft, and we had better call it looting. Several years ago, again, not even years, last year, I was in Monrovia, Liberia, and a great Liberian, Boima Fanbule, who made a presentation after I did, said, we have long referred to this thing called theft as corruption. And when we call it corruption, people don't think that these perpetrators are thieves. We had better call it theft on an industrial scale. And I agree with both of them. But yet, there is a sense in which we rationalize corruption. In Africa, many individuals condemn corruption not because they hate it, but because they lack the opportunity to participate in it. The day they get the opportunity to participate in it, that is the day they go quiet. I remember when I was the director of Anti-Corruption Authority, we were about to arrest a cabinet minister, and a friend of ours asked, but this cabinet minister used to speak about and against corruption, what happened? And the friend told me, you only make noise when your mouth is empty. When your mouth is full, how can you make noise? And we were discussing this in Africa. There are different ways. There are those who participate in corruption and they don't think that is wrong. And he very aptly told me, my friend here, that there is a saying, whether you are talking about the Mandika or the Wolof or the Fulani, they say that a sheep grazes where it is tied. And that is how but I told him, no, you must not graze where you are tied because the grass is not yours. In fact, you are not a sheep. And number two, you are employed there to take care of the grass. You are custodian and a trustee of the grass, or what you refer to as grass. And I'm submitting to us that the issue that we must talk about, and as I grow older and I interact with corruption, I think that there is a spiritual dimension to this thing called corruption. I was telling an audience of mine that even if you are a Christian, read the Bible. The Bible is clear that corruption is a bad thing, whether it's in the Old Testament, whether it's in the New Testament. When you read the Holy Quran, I think it is Al-Baqarah, at verse 188, go and read it. Those of you who are Muslims, Al-Baqarah, you'll find a clear statement that you shall not partake of that which is not yours. And yet, we are Christians. We go to churches on Saturdays, on Sundays, and indeed when we are baptized as Christians, we say we reject the devil with all his works, and the following day we are dining with the devil with very short spoons. We are Muslims. We pray 5 times a day with the Qibla to the holy city of Mecca. We attend the Salat al-Jum'ah, and immediately we come out of the mosque, we are engaged in theft on an industrial scale. So that this thing also undermines our Christianity. It undermines our being Muslims. It undermines our belief in a being that we worship called God. What is it? In our societies, in different parts of Africa, we recognize and condemn theft. Yet when we give individuals the opportunity to serve us and they engage in theft, we celebrate them. We know all these. There are those who, when we talk about corruption, say that corruption is a victimless crime. How can a crime be without victims? When we talk about corruption, some individuals in government ask, and whose goat have I stolen? Is it your goat? The answer is, you are stealing our goats. What one is saying is that corruption has undermined the growth and development of the continent of Africa. This is the richest continent on earth. I always imagine to myself, on the day of creation when the world was void and without form, and God created the world, if there is a continent that He blessed so much, it is this one. If you look at the resources, the water resource, the rivers in Africa, look at the Gambia. The world is now suffering. Cape Town in South Africa, Nairobi in Kenya, Windhoek in Namibia is worrying about the shortage of drinking water. You have plenty of water here. The world and even yourselves are worrying about electricity and electricity generation. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, if you harness the resources of the Inga Dam, the entire continent of Africa would be lit. We are worrying, the world is now worried about winter in China, in the United States of America, and in other parts of the world. Our Sahara is receiving more sunshine than anywhere else in the world. If you harness solar power there, the entire Africa would be lit. Africa does not manufacture nor utilize any nuclear energy, yet the ingredients that are used in nuclear power are to be found here in Niger. They are to be found in Namibia. If you're thinking about gold, you go down to South Africa. All of us have mobile phones. If the ingredient that is mandatory in every mobile phone, sometimes referred to as rare earth, the largest producer of it is the Democratic Republic of Congo. One can go on and on. That is the continent that God gave unto us. And his divine instruction was, go ye and subdue the world. By the sweat of their brow, thou shalt change that world. But as I speak to you, the world has subdued us. That is why the American president refers to our countries in most uncharitable terms. But am I angry with the American president? No, I am not. He has angered me into action, and he should anger us into action, so that next time, 10 years from today, when an American president is making reference to the continent of Africa and to the black residents of the continent of Africa, he or she will be able to say, behold, the people who are once despised, they have lifted themselves by their bootstraps. They now sit at the dinner table of civilization. And we can do it if we liberate ourselves from corruption, if we liberate ourselves from this looting, if we liberate ourselves from this theft on an industrial scale. And it must start with us. It must start with us. How must it start with us? We must make a personal vow, each one of us. Make a personal vow that in the daily affairs that you conduct, you will not engage in any conduct that will destroy the things that belong to others. Have you ever asked yourself, if you are a government employee and your child asks you for a pen, and you make a requisition in your office that you need a pen, and then you carry that pen to your home, and you tell your little child, baby or mommy or daddy or which other phone names you normally use, here is the pen that I bought for you. You liar! You are a thief! You simply stolen government stores. And it starts that way because you start by stealing pens. And when you become a permanent secretary and an accounting officer, you begin to steal medicine. You begin to steal money that is meant for roads. You are a murderer, because if you don't apply the right amount of tar on the road, there'll be accidents because you stole money. If there is a child or a mother who dies in hospital and you are the Minister for Health because you have built an apartment in Dubai, you are a murderer in addition to being a thief. And if you are the head of state and you are building mansions in other parts of the world and your people are dying because they cannot get what you deserve, in addition to being a looter and a grand thief, you are also a murderer. And we have no shortage of murderers in this part of the world. And we are saying that all these that we are saying, we know. We know all these because the African continent has been analyzed. The corruption in Africa has been analyzed. When the world met in Merida in Mexico in the year 2003 and came up with the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, we knew that corruption was a cancer in our body politic, and we signed and ratified that. In the same year, we also signed and ratified the African Convention for Preventing and Combating Corruption. We know. We also know, and we have enacted laws domestically that deal with corruption. We know that corruption is bad. We have formed anti-corruption bodies. We know. We attend conferences and symposiums and workshops against corruption. We know that corruption is bad. We preach about and against corruption in our churches every other Sunday and Saturday. We know. We mention these things in our mosques. We know. We talk about them in the temples. We know. We talk about them in barazas. We know all these. What then has not happened? What has not happened? Our leaders, when they come to meetings or they attend meetings, they speak about it. Even the greatest thieves, who are known as thieves, when we invite them to forums such as this, the first thing they say is that they condemn corruption. In other words, we know what language to speak where. What is the gap? What is not happening in Africa? Why is it that we know what is wrong and we choose deliberately to do that which is not correct? This is the question. Is it that we are incapable of change? Is it that it's now become a part of our DNA? Is it, if you permit me this analogy, that we came from Egypt, but Egypt is still so resident in us? Is that the problem? Is it that we cannot change? Because we must. Sometimes, when we talk about it in a manner such as we are doing in forums such as this, it doesn't look even real. It doesn't even look painful. But when you see young Africans on national media running from African countries, whether it's Nigeria or Eritrea or the Gambia or Senegal, crossing the Sahara Desert and dying in the Mediterranean Sea that has become the graveyard for young Africans, then you know that corruption is real. Because the only reason why those young men and women are running away is because the men and women who are charged with running their countries have run down those countries, so that there are no opportunities for them. I listened to one of them being asked, "Why are you coming to sure death?" He said, "I'd rather die trying." And that individual has a person in his country of birth who is called the president, who is addressed as His Excellency. He has one. That individual has a country where there is a minister for labor. That individual has a country where there are laws. What happened? What happened is that in the intervening period, the men and women who are described as leaders in his country, but who are truly misleaders, have bled their countries dry. And the tragedy is that once they have stolen this money, they have no faith in their country. They keep it in the Cayman Islands. They keep it in Switzerland. So that if their men, not even their wives, know that they have money in the Cayman Islands, not even their children, so that when they die, it is the Swiss who enjoy that wealth as unclaimed wealth. And this is not idle. We know that from the story of people like Mobutu of the former Zaire, now Democratic Republic of Congo. We know that because of the recent story of Sani Abacha of Nigeria, in respect of whom money has been recovered and returned to Nigeria. So what must we do? It must be personal change. There is something that we love called democracy. What is democracy? Democracy presupposes that people are aware of what they want. If people are not aware of what they want, then the thing you call democracy is not democracy. You must find a name for it. Some refer to it as mobocracy. Perhaps that is the word. Is a government by the mob for the mob. Is that what we have in Africa masquerading as democracy? Because how can we talk of democracy when the people vote on the basis of bribes? Dalasi, $20, and you vote. You sell your birthright. You vote because somebody comes from your tribe. How does that help you? How? That somebody comes from your tribe, therefore they are good in and of itself. You deny good men and women opportunity to serve you, then you complain. As I said at one forum, you allow a hyena to take care of your goats, and once the goats are eaten, you are surprised. How can you possibly be surprised? And yet it's in the nature of hyenas to eat goats. I'm happy that this year the leaders of Africa have recognized that corruption is so dangerous that it must be fought. And the year 2018 has now been dedicated as the year for fighting corruption as one of the prerequisites to transforming Africa. When they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, between the 28th and the 30th day of January 2018, all the leaders of Africa, all their representatives, dedicated themselves to ensuring that corruption is fought, so that Africa can realize our Agenda 2063, which is meant to transform Africa. But the question is, we have had so many pronouncements for so long that we who are lovers of Africa and sometimes are guardedly optimistic are questioning, will it really happen? Because the world has had all these things. When it came to development, we had the Millennium Development Goals. There were only 8. We never realized them. There were only 8. Then, after we failed to realize them by the year 2015, we renamed them. They are now Sustainable Development Goals. And they are no longer 8, they are now 17. It would appear that the more we apply an antidote to this wound, the bigger the wound. Which begs the question, have we diagnosed the problem properly? And if we have, are we applying the right medicine? This is the question. But yet we cannot afford the luxury of pessimism. We must be optimistic. The reason why we must be optimistic is that extant evidence demonstrates that when a people have made a determination to do that which is good and right for themselves, there are results to be seen. Why do I say so?